The rebels snub Rishi's plea, and it's talking about the different challenges the Prime Minister faces over this policy that a little bit, you know, sort of like a dinghy in the channel, he's clinging on to for dear life. But one wonders whether this is just a fool's errand. I mean, it's not getting him anywhere politically, this, is it?
No, I think it is a fool's errand. I think it was never a practical plan, frankly. I think the principle is correct. We don't want illegal immigrants thinking that they can come here and settle, and you know, they should be moved on. And it's a problem, but it's a problem for the whole world. It's a global problem. Yeah. As ever, I think Britain is leading the way on this in trying to find a way to do it, but this is not the way to do it. And I'm afraid it's dragging the Tory party down. I can't see why at the moment they're allowing it to just descend into a legal battle that actually is boring the public. I think the public are bored with it. They've had enough of it. And actually, they're not addressing the real issues that they should be addressing at the moment in order to try and claw back some votes and you know, hopefully win the election.
I mean, the electorate clearly does care about migration, both legal and illegal, and expects a Tory government particularly to do something about it. So we can see the politics behind a pledge to stop the boats and bring the legal numbers down. However, and I know you now work in PR, from a PR perspective, I thought that emergency press conference in the week where he's already on the ropes, and then he puts himself in a position where he allows my GB News colleague Chris Hope, as political editor, to basically put a question to him and say, this policy is a joke and you're a joke, aren't you, Prime Minister? I mean, this is bad politics.
It's terrible politics, and it's been really badly managed from a communications point of view as well. You know, and that's a classic example of it. The problem is he cannot win. He really cannot win with this. He can't. He doesn't want to make it tough enough that it actually would work. So he's alienating the right wing of his party anyway.
Yes.
You know, Parliament should. Let's be honest, Parliament should trump the will of the ECHR. It should.
Yes.
That's what it should do. It has the right to do it, and it should do it. But to try and do that now, before an election, even if the election's at the end of the year, we're still going to be arguing the legalities of it at a time when Labour are just sitting back and just enjoying the fight.
Yes.
And you know, the Tories need to be taking that fight to them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we don't know what on earth Keir Starmer would do about any of these issues.
He wouldn't do anything. He literally wouldn't do anything. But and people actually deep down know that.
Yeah.
He's not interested in doing anything about it.
Having said that, I mean, regardless of whether Labour have come up with an alternative or not, and they have adopted this kind of policy of being a silent assassin, there's polling, or at least the pollster John Curtis, who obviously is sort of country renowned for being pretty spot on when it comes to his predictions. He's saying that there could be a complete wipeout at the next general election for the Tories, that it could be the worst election result ever. They could win just 130 seats. I'm trying to remind myself what they won in 97. I think it was 162. So worse than 97. 165, I'm told in my ear by my producer. So that could be absolutely catastrophic for them.
Yeah, it could. And to be honest, you know, the writing's on the wall for them. I mean, they squandered a fantastic majority from 2019. Totally squandered it. Boris completely squandered it. For me, never to be forgiven for doing that, frankly.
I mean, do you believe that prediction?
No, well, I don't tend to believe polls, if I'm honest, and I think polls are, because ultimately when people get to the election box, they're going to always vote with their pockets. That's the way I view it. People get to the election and they're going to say, right, which of these parties is going to actually put more money in my pocket, is going to make my family feel more secure, etc., etc. That's what they do. So whatever people are saying now, in the heat of the moment, with all these rows going on, with all of these ministers resigning and all of the scandal around
is anyone actually paying much notice to all this? They're out doing their Christmas shopping.
They're out doing their Christmas shopping.
But they've got the overall feeling of shambles.
Absolutely, and they're noticing how expensive everything is. They're trying to heat their homes. There's people freezing out there. And actually, the Tories are in this kind of... They're just fighting amongst themselves. It's like an echo chamber.
I mean, it was ever thus. Oh, the Prime Minister can't be too tough with this legislation because he doesn't want to alienate the Tories on the so-called left of the party. If he's too tough, he keeps the righties happy, but they're unhappy. It's like he talks about this broad church. I mean, he's a vicar trying to preach to a congregation, basically practising different religions.
Yeah, he is. And at the same time, I mean, it is plus de change, but it's also... There's very rarely been a situation where the Labour Party itself looks so weak. The Labour Party at the moment has... Nobody knows what Keir Starmer stands for. He's not particularly popular. It's a brilliant time for the Tories to be attacking Labour and saying, well, what would you do about this? What would you do about that? You know,
take the fight to Labour.
Take the fight to Labour, because if Labour win the election, God forbid, but if they do, we know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to pile in wanting, you know, the public sector to be, you know, masses of money to be put into the public sector. There's no money there. The
pay rises left, right and centre.
Exactly.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the B word there. Let's talk about my GB News colleague, Boris Johnson, and my other GB News colleague, Nigel Farage.
Yes.
Because there is a story in the Mail on Sunday suggesting that some Tory MPs are in a, quote, dramatic plot to bring back Boris as the only way to avert this electoral wipeout. And could he be on a dream ticket with Nigel? I mean, that's what I'm saying. I find the papers quite extraordinary this morning. Are we actually serious? I mean, first of all, bring back Boris. Your reaction, Martin?
Why? Why? I mean,
because he's a good campaigner and he can probably win more votes than Rishi Sunak, arguably.
But what happens when he wins that majority?
Yeah, no,
People have already seen.
And what do you make of this whole idea? I don't understand the rhetoric around Nigel joining the Tories. Surely Nigel, if he really wants to pack a political punch, needs to go back at the helm of reform, with apologies to my other GB News colleague, Richard Tyson.
Yes, he does.
And take on the Tories directly. I mean, I appreciate the argument about that just splits the vote on the right and it goes to Labour, but in opposition, I don't really know what Nigel Farage can do in the Tory party in opposition, really.
No,
I suppose take the fight to Labour, as you've suggested.
Yeah.
I just don't know how credible that whole plan is.
It's completely incredible, and I don't believe a word of it, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think, frankly, you're completely right. Farage, Richard Tyson's a very nice man, but he's nowhere near as popular as Nigel Farage is.
Yeah.
He needs Farage in the Reform Party at the moment, not in the Tories.
Yeah, but the Reform Party could be a real force to be reckoned with.
Yes, I think it could, yeah.
And I think somebody had once said at CCHQ, you know, if Reform get to 10%, we are a word beginning with F. And now they're polling at around, I think, 11, or that seems to be the Westminster intention, that people are moving to Reform in their droves.
Yes.
Let's change gears and talk about the royals at Christmas.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a photograph of the Cambridges, as they once were known, now the Prince and Princess of Wales, and their 3 children, Charlotte, George and Louis. It's a black and white image. It's their Christmas shot. They're all in kind of matching shirts. It's called a Christmas cracker on the front of the Sunday Tell. It's covered in all the papers, but what do you make of this image?
I just really don't like it.
Oh.
I just think it's completely miserable. I mean, they look...
They look smiley. They look lovely and smiley.
They're lovely and smiley. I just don't understand why anyone would put a mono photograph. Only those people in Montecito would think of putting a black and white photograph out at Christmas. I think.
And you are speaking as a former magazine editor,
I am.
because you used to edit OK, so you like glossy images.
I think at Christmas people want colour. They want, you know, that.
Do we want them in Christmas jumpers? Just be honest.
I don't particularly, because I'm not a big fan of Christmas jumpers.
Right.
I want to see a happy family, but I want to see a bit of brightness and colour.
All right. So you should have done a colour image.
We're living in a very black and white times at the moment, you know, out there in the big old world. To a certain extent, the royal family have to understand that they are part of escapism to a certain extent.
No, OK, fair enough.
And I think that should
Colour images, please, royals.
Yes,
colour
please.
images.
Yeah.
Finally, I do want to ask you, as a former national newspaper editor, about this story on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. Ex-MI6 boss warns of security risk in Abu Dhabi telegraph bid. That's Sir Richard Dearlove saying, basically, to the government, you've got to stop this. Briefly, what's your view on it, Martin?
Fantastic intervention by Dearlove. This should be a much, much bigger story. This is a huge story for Britain at the moment. If we allow a newspaper to be owned by the UAE or any other overseas territory with that kind of record on you know, the public, you know,
freedom of speech and expression, yeah.
Then we are totally lost. Owners will always try and influence the paper. I mean, this has been going on for decades. This is always what happens. The idea that they're not going to try and influence the paper is for the birds. They will.
Yeah.
And we cannot allow that to happen with a regime like that.
I should say, in defence of the bid that's been made by Redbird IMI, they insist that they will adhere to journalistic neutrality and that they won't try and influence the tone of the paper or indeed the stories. It should also be pointed out, as we're covering this, that Paul Marshall, who has a stake in this channel, GB News, is also trying to make a bid for the Telegraph. But it's obviously quite worrying times for that newspaper, which I write for as well.
Indeed.
Martin Townsend, been a pleasure as ever to speak to you this morning. Thank you very, very much indeed for your insights.